I want to bring into the conversation now our friend Chuck Rosenberg. He's a former U.S. attorney from the Eastern District of Virginia. He's also a former senior FBI and senior Justice Department official. Chuck, thank you so much for being here. I haven't had a chance to be in touch with you about this at all since we got this letter from the Attorney General, since we got this characterization of how the Mueller probe is coming to an end. I'd love to just hear your top-line reaction to how this has gone down tonight so far.
Yeah, top line reaction, Rachel. And by the way, thanks for having me on. Fascinating issues, interesting day. Top line reaction is that now you can see why the relationship historically between the White House and the Justice Department has been so carefully guarded, why we don't normally communicate the results of investigations to the White House, particularly where it involves, senior White House officials. There's this tension, of course, because Mueller and Rosenstein and Bill Barr, the Attorney General, are all parts of the executive branch. And the president, of course, is the head of the executive branch. And so if the president demanded the report, it's entirely plausible that Bill Barr would give it to him, perhaps after telling him what a bad idea it would be to receive it. But Barr ultimately works for the president. And so this is a fraught relationship, and that is specifically why we've been so careful in the past about passing information between the White House and the Justice Department.
And Chuck, in terms of the news that we got from NBC tonight that the special counsel's office will not make any more indictments, that, I think, is being greeted in some quarters as a sign that there will be no more indictments, period, that anybody who hasn't been charged yet in any relation to this investigation or anything that is derived from it is now home free. We've seen actually at least one person tonight who had been offered a plea agreement at some point, Jerome Corsi, who seemed to potentially have an indictment on his way. Somebody saying that this shows that he's been vindicated. It's won. It's all over. Yeah. I wonder if you think that the fact that more indictments aren't coming from the special counsel's office necessarily means that other indictments might not be coming from other U.S. attorneys or from Main Justice.
I think it is way too early for Mr. Corsi and others to be dancing in the end zone, Rachel. Here's why. It seems to me that a lot of these cases, whether it's Corsi or Carter Page, right, or Randy Credico, or the Trump kids, or folks associated with the inaugural committee, or the Trump organization, can be charged and prosecuted elsewhere. They don't have to be charged and prosecuted by Bob Mueller. So Mueller may not be indicting anyone else, but I fully expect other indictments in what I am broadly calling this case. Mueller's remit was always rather narrow. I disagree with the congressman in one respect. Mueller was asked to look at Russian interference in the 2016 election. Nobody asked Mueller to rummage through Trump's attic. And so we know the Southern District of New York investigation continues. We know that the president, for instance, was identified in public court filings as having directed illegal campaign finance payments. We know other people were involved in that. We know that Cohn and Flynn and Gates and others continue to cooperate. We see large amounts of redacted portions in recent public court filings. Stuff is still happening. Even if the Mueller team doesn't indict and prosecute anyone else, I'm still quite certain, like I said earlier, that others should not be celebrating just yet.
And Chuck, let me ask you about something that was raised earlier this hour. Josh Gerstein raised a really good point, which is that when we're talking about what exactly Mueller was asked to look into, I mean, we know what was in the order creating this special counsel. We know, or appointing the special counsel. We know some of what was in a subsequent sort of scoping memo that laid out what he was authorized to investigate. But big portions of that were redacted. What would have to transpire, or what would have to be sort of cleared up for us to ever be able to see behind those redactions? Now that the special counsel's investigation is done, would you expect that we'll get to know the full terms of exactly what he was scoped to look into?
I imagine we will one day. I'm not sure it's going to happen as quickly as we all might like. There's a bunch of things that I can imagine are in the scoping memo or even in the Mueller report, which I presume will be quite thorough and quite voluminous, that we really can't see yet. Congressman Schiff spoke about classified information. Sure, it can be redacted. Sure, it can be declassified. But there's also good reasons in some cases not to do that, or at least not to do that yet. The other types of information, Rachel, that we may not see, at least not immediately, are information related to ongoing investigations. Again, all of those redactions in public filings speak to the fact that other stuff is going on and that prosecutors and agents are continuing their work. So, we eventually get to see almost everything. It took 40 years to see some of Mr. Jaworski's work in the Watergate investigation. I don't think we'll have to wait that long, but again, I don't think it's going to be as quickly as we might like because of A, the sensitive classified nature of some of the stuff, and B, the fact that we clearly have ongoing investigations in other districts, including in Manhattan.
Chuck Rosenberg, former U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, former senior FBI and Justice Department official. Chuck, as always, it's great to have you here, particularly tonight. Thanks, Chuck. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.